What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 67th edition of Tequila Tuesday and Scotty's Little Sales Club, brought to you by our good friends at Sendoso, represented by my man Danny over there, I see. What's up, Danny? Sendoso is Scotty's Little Sales Club's official sending partner. And really excited to talk to LG Laura Guerra. I don't even know how to pronounce your last name, I just realized. I hope I didn't butcher it too bad. But Laura is the VP of Growth at Pavilion. Most of you probably know, if not all of you know what Pavilion is, but we'll let her talk a little bit about what that's all about. But I thought an interesting topic of conversation and a little training would be to how to utilize community in the sales process. I think for me personally, this is going to be more and more important. It's one of the things that I think is going to be essential in 2023 in order to get deals across the line. As phones disappear, people don't pick up the phone. As email dries up, nobody wants to answer or reply to emails. If your inbox on LinkedIn looks anything like mine, it's a total shit show. I can barely filter through it. That isn't working that much anymore. So where do we go? What do we turn to? So I thought this was a really timely conversation and topic, and there's no better person, I think, to talk to about it than Laura. And I'm very excited to be here with Laura because I don't know her at all. That we were just talking. This is the first time we've ever met. We only know each other kind of through LinkedIn and that type of stuff. So it should be a lot of fun. Laura or LG. Awesome. I don't know which one you want to go by.
But yeah, y'all can call me LG unless I'm in trouble. Then you can call me Laura.
Okay,
but
LG.
Nice to see everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a huge fan of Scott and just everything that he represents. So much so that I told our VP of learning, like we've got to get a course at Pavilion University with Scott and his content. So great to see everyone. I am Laura Guerra. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me know if y'all, hold on one sec here. All right. Let me know if y'all can see my screen. Can I get a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. So, today we're going to talk about how to leverage community in deal flow, but also just in general, right? I think communities are all the rage right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about, well, first just get to know each other as humans, as revenue professionals. We'll take a step back to look at like why are people talking about communities? Why is this such a thing? Why have communities exploded really over the last couple of years? We'll take a look at an overview of communities and then understand kind of what are some of the character traits, what are some of the frameworks and the mindset that we need to have to successfully, approach communities and the people that we're meeting to help us win deals, right? Because we know that if we're just approaching like, hey, I want to join a community because I want to win more deals, I think you're going to experience the opposite effect. So I think the mindset and how we understand what communities are and how to leverage them is super important. So I'm going to start with an intro first. And then I think, again, this is like, I want this to be super conversational. So feel free to like pop off mute, type in, chats into the chat here with any questions or comments or stories that you'd like to add. But just a quick background on me. So I've been in sales and sales leadership my whole career, for selling ergonomic equipment and consulting to SaaS, food tech, sales enablement software, you name it. I joined Pavilion in 2018 as a member, then became the chapter head of the Los Angeles chapter and was doing like cold outbound on LinkedIn on my own to build up LA, and then joined the HQ team full-time back a couple of years ago when we had about probably 1,800 members, and we've now got over 10,000 members globally. And so in my current role, I oversee the SDR, AE, customer success, and account management teams. In my spare time, I love to play golf. I like to do yoga. I like to box for both physical and mental therapy. And I'm super, super passionate about all things sales, revenue, getting more people into sales and community. So would love to just hear in the chat, like if y'all want to type. I don't think it's letting me, hold on, see.
Should be. You're the are the co-host.
If I can see what's in the chat here. Weird. I guess before we dive in, why don't we have just a couple folks go off mute and just share like what would you like to hear or see out of the conversation today? Anything specific?
Danny, let's start with you, our sponsor representative from Sendoso.
Hi, OG. So I just stepped into a new role as a community manager, and my ultimate goal is to really turn our advocates to more big spenders at Sendoso. So for this, I'd like to learn on how you build the community at Pavilion. That'd be super awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. We will definitely talk about that.
Who else?
Anything
Don't make me
else?
call on people like I'm a 6th grade teacher. Because I will. Cynthia, it's Tuesday. The margarita's in hand. Come on.
Dude, I'm just preparing for Costa Rica. Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question again? I was enthralled with my margarita.
What do you
Just a
Question.
what are
Hi.
you looking to get out of the conversation today? Is there anything specific that you're curious about?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in community. I think it's the way I'm actually in a customer success role for an exchange market technology division. And I think this is an area that we're not harnessing right now. And part of it is the fear, like my leader, who's just super smart guy, he's terrified of creating a community where our customers can go and bitch about us. And I'm like, yeah, but if they do, we can address their concerns and then build the relationship. And this is the way I keep telling them over and over, this is how it's happening. This is, peers our customers want to talk to each other. If we're the vessel for bringing them together, then they're going to talk to each other. We're going to capture all that market intelligence and then be able to, like obviously address their concerns, create our products around that. That's how we're going to grow. And I'm like hitting my head against the wall. So any ideas you have, I would love to hear them.
Absolutely. Okay. Excellent. Just side note, this is a picture of me when my sales team we hit our sales targets, and I got spaghettied in the face. So big fan of all things culture, and don't mind embarrassing myself from time to time. Okay, so I think we all understand like why community. So a little bit on, let me just touch on kind of both of those questions in terms of like how to build community. So community, right, is a common set of values, shared beliefs, to help one another succeed. And first, it's really, really important to understand what's driving an explosion of new communities and how business has changed. Right. So if we look at just, again, the last 10 years, and really beyond that, after the dot-com bubble, right? We've got the rise of social media. We've got SaaS companies that is continuing to explode despite the current economic environment that we're facing today. In fact, Fortune 1000 companies have reported that AI and big data will replace 85 million jobs, right? So by 2025. So that really means that for us as sales professionals, revenue professionals, this idea of community, which is harnessed really with people as the backbone of what community really is increasingly more and more important. We've also got, as a result of an explosion in technology, it's easier for companies to go global, go multinational, and hiring folks from all over the world. And really, lastly, if we look at how COVID has impacted the way that we work, right? Many of us probably work from home, but ultimately, I think that, again, this has forever changed the way that we work. And I think on the plus side, it's made many of us more productive. It's more convenient. But I think the downside is that there's less social time, less interaction with our peers. That's part of why, as Pavilion, we grew 5x in 2020, because again, people were craving that human interaction, craving to understand, what are my peers doing? How are they developing professionally? What are they talking about? Because these best practices change so quickly. So, right now we've got, you all are already part of this community, this Patreon, which is amazing, but there's all sorts of communities. So as we think about like, how do you build a community, whether you're looking to build your own or join one, right? The first step is like deciding and committing. So maybe you're part of one or two communities. And I guess I'll just take a couple of minutes for those of you who aren't familiar with Pavilion already. So we are a global network based on community-powered learning, focused on helping people achieve their professional potential. So that means building the knowledge and the skills and the network that you need to succeed in what you're doing today, but also prepare you for what's next. So we do this through structured learning. So we've got over 40 courses in schools through Pavilion University, starting from SDR level, copywriting, cold calling, account management, et cetera, all the way up to our CRO school for C-suite executives, as well as many executive level schools. Super excited. I will definitely be taking Scott's course. That's, I think, launching in the new year. So structured learning, as well as a bunch of forums and in-person opportunities to connect in person. So that's who we are. So once you've joined a community, right, the first step is, these are kind of like the pillars of what to keep in mind. So if you're, I think I came at this from the lens of how to optimize a community that you're already in. So I want to make sure that I address, like, if you're looking to build a community with your company or just on your own personally, how to do that. So if you joined a community, like, these are the tenets, we're going to walk through these step by step. But really, if we look at how Pavilion grew, really the key to our growth was our chapter head model, right? So I mentioned that I started with Pavilion as a chapter head. So what Sam Jacobs did, our founder and CEO, was we actually hired chapter heads that were paid as contractors to build micro communities across the world. So up until actually this year, we were paying our chapter heads, right? They were making a revenue share of membership dues. Now, what's important is that most chapter heads didn't do this for the money. Most chapter heads, myself included, again, I was always a believer in your network is your net worth. It's all about who you know. And so I really just did this because I'm a firm believer in learning from others and helping others learn and grow as well. So I think for those of you looking to build community, right, it's about identifying your raving fans, right? Like who would be on your customer advisory board? Like who will do this just for the sake of, like, because they see value in your product. So I think that's step one, is identifying folks who have a shared, right, common beliefs, values, who will advocate on your behalf publicly, identifying who those folks are, right? And then creating a specific program. Again, if you have a customer advisory program, you can start with that as the foundation for your community. Then the second step is outlining your values, right? Because in order for you to find the right folks to be a part of this group, to really lead and spearhead this group, they need to understand what your values are and what the expectations are. So we at Pavilion made it very, very clear to our chapter heads, these are the expectations, this is what the role is about, this is the time requirement, and we gave them training and enablement around, here's how you run an effective dinner, right? Because I think we've all been to those like shitty networking dinners where you have like one guy talking about how awesome he is for 3 hours and you don't really, there's not much value there, right? So we've trained our chapter heads and our leaders, the leaders in our community, on how to actually run an effective dinner so that everybody gets an opportunity to speak, so that everybody's getting value out of the events. So again, if you're building your community, it's step one, define your values. Step two, define that, identify who those customers are, who those leaders, those spokespeople could be, and then outline, again, what you want, how you want them to take a leadership role in building your community. Any questions on any of that so far?
Can you go back one slide? I had a question / thought.
Oh,
that slide. No, not that slide. One more. This one.
yes.
One of the things that I was thinking when I was looking at this in terms of changes to the modern workplace, it's also to me changed what we consider, or where we consider getting credible information from. We don't go to Google anymore to get answers for things. We go ask LG or we go ask Scott, right? And I don't know how much of that is it is election day, but like all this chaos around what's real or not and all this kind of stuff and bots and all that fake shit. But like, that's literally where we go to get advice now. Right. And it wasn't that way all the time, at least in my opinion, where that credible source of information is actually coming from one another, which is very peer to peer. So not that I think that it's relevant to the slide that you had. That was what I was thinking. Like that could be another thing that is a big change, is like what we consider a source of credible information is different.
Totally. And yeah, there have been a lot of really interesting studies that have shared that, like, especially like millennials, but Gen Z, like, are the generation that trusts. There's the least amount of trust in our business leaders, politicians, etc. Right. And so people are more likely to trust each other, right? We're more likely to trust each other on this call than maybe our executives or just other sources of information out there. Yeah, that's a really great point. Okay. So again, if you are building your community, you've identified your values, you've identified your advocates. Like even if we just like do a quick case study on Gong's community, like I didn't know anything. This was we first brought on Gong. I was at, I'm blanking what company. It was a few years back before I had even heard of them. But I remember I knew about Gong Labs before I knew about.
Uh-oh. Did she freeze for anybody else?
She froze.
Yeah, she's getting a margarita.
That's me. I've got it.
Well played.
Oh my
Cynthia's on
God,
point.
Cynthia,
Yeah.
you have no idea. Wait till you have the tequila, and Costa Rica. Scott knows how to throw a party.
Oh my God. I'm afraid actually. I'm actually afraid.
No, there's no.
You're in training.
no
You're in
pressure.
training right now.
Yeah.
Stick with it that way.
Correct.
You're just
In
training.
my mind, I'm already there, Scott.
Yeah, well, trust me.
Scott, is it next week?
So there's two back to back.
There are.
So it's the 12th to the 16th, and then the 17th to the 21st.
Nice.
And then we didn't put it on the website yet, but May 8th through 12th of next year is the next one. So we usually, not usually, last year we flipped the site while we were in Costa Rica, and there was lots of buzz going on, and we sold the spring one out before we even got home. So we're going to try to do the same kind of thing. I'm sure LG has lost her connection. We'll try to get back on. A couple of the questions. Jason, do you want to take yourself off mute for a second and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks everybody. Totally new, first time here, first time caller and question asker. Yeah, so I'm kind of new to Pavilion. I've looked into it. I'm trying to understand. She was talking a lot about selling the product. I'm just trying to understand that. I saw that it was you're basically paying to get in a community that shares similar go-to-market strategies. Is that the idea?
Part of it, yes. She could obviously talk a lot more to it, but they have all sorts of courses, and they have like a CRO school and things like that. And they have different content creators who come in and deliver courses. Like this one in January that I'm doing. Hi, LG. I'll shut up in just a second. This one in January that I'm doing, Jason, is sort of like how to be a VP of sales and take a company from 0 to whatever. And it's like 4 different sessions of an hour to an hour and a half. So you get access to all of that kind of stuff as well. Right? And that's presumably the value for what your subscription is and that type of thing. So
Okay, thanks.
yeah, and hopefully that answers Lori's question too about, is my course free? I mean, it's free if you're a member of Pavilion.
We guess you'll know.
Yeah, go ahead, LG.
Hey, y'all. Sorry about that. Of course, I'm at a hotel room in New York, and of course, I don't have any Wi-Fi issues until right now. So
that's how it happens. Yeah.
Of course. Okay, cool. So I think I was just sharing something about a story about Gong, which is that, like, again, for those of you looking to build community, right? When I think of like Sales Hacker, Gong, right? Like they started with thought leadership first, content first. And with Pavilion specifically, like we started because Sam Jacobs, our founder and CEO, he was, openly talks about, says if you're a VP of sales and you haven't been fired in your career, you will at some point, right? Because as VC money gets poured into high growth startups, there's very unrealistic growth expectations. And if companies aren't hitting target, there could be a million factors, but it typically falls on the VP of sales. So what started as, a group of executives just getting together for dinner on a monthly basis turned into weekly, turned into more and more people of like, hey, let's like actually talk about the shit that we're all going through in our careers as revenue executives. And let's share the comp plans that we're using. Let's share the sample board decks. So that is what created, that's how Pavilion was started. To Scott's point earlier about just like trusting each other more than what we're seeing and experiencing out there in the world. So what we consolidated all of we then built, so it started as events, but then we took the resources and we built a knowledge hub. So we took people's, again, we now have a knowledge hub of over 800 templates, comp plans, forecast templates, annual budgeting, modeling templates, anything you could possibly think of that our members have access to, which again, we captured from our members. So it's really about, again, starts with the people, and then it's tapping into their expertise, their commitment, their resources as kind of the foundation. But for those of you, again, looking to get involved in whatever community, right? Again, in order to use community in a deal flow, like you have to be an active participant in your community, right? Again, already a huge win that you're here and showing up to this community. When people leave Pavilion, right, we experience churn just like any other business. We typically hear, oh, I'm so busy, right? And it's true. Like we all have shit going on in our lives, and sometimes are busier than others. That's absolutely true. But I think that when it comes to building your community, again, just like anything else in life, you have to be dedicated and committed, the same way that like influencers on LinkedIn will tell you, if you want to build your brand on LinkedIn, like you've got to be consistent with creating your content. Same thing with the community. You've got to show up. And we have CEOs in our CEO Pavilion who are a part of our monthly calls every month. So there are, again, it's about finding the right cadence that works for you and the right community that works for you. But you've got to be an active participant in order to effectively leverage it in your deals. The other important frame of mind to have in any community is many people join communities because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn so much and I can't wait to like meet awesome new people who are going to find me jobs and who can help me where I can close more deals. I can tell you right now that is you're not going to be as successful as you would like with that mindset. Because we always like to say community should feel like a marriage or a relationship for any of you in, with a partnership. You should always feel like you're giving more than you're receiving. Like that's what makes the magic happen. And when we started Pavilion, I had a team of folks who were interviewing people to join, right? And, our philosophy has kind of changed. We now pretty much accept anyone who lives by our values and our rules. Like you can't, do cold outreach to sell other members, as an example. But when we were interviewing people, we would ask people, what do you have to contribute back to the community? And we would make people tell us, right? And it's again, and people who are like, well, I just want to join because I just want to find a job, or I just like, I want to get, we would actually deny them from the community. And the fact that the word started to get out there, like, oh my God, I wasn't let into Pavilion. And that is how we maintained this concept of exclusivity. And really it started with a core group of people who genuinely just wanted to share what they know. Right. And I'm personally a big fan of like, if there are any SDRs on the line or just more folks junior in your career, like I learn from my SDRs all the time about like what subject lines are converting and effective sequence structures and so forth. So even if you're junior in your career, you still have experiences and knowledge that you can share. But having, I think, again, showing up again, the same thing with like LinkedIn, right? If you're trying to build your brand on LinkedIn, the best way to get started is by engaging in other people's content and writing on other people's posts and sharing your thoughts and insights. So I think, again, this is super, super important as you think about building your own community or participating in another community. And I'll talk about why, right? I think we've all heard the law of reciprocity, right? Which is that like when people receive something, they feel compelled to return the favor. I will always remember like back when I was in like field sales, this lady was just so cold. And I ended up taking her to lunch, and I just asked her a bunch of questions about her, right? I teach this to my team. Like, people like to talk about two things. What are those things that people like to talk about generally? Themselves and their kids. Yes, themselves and their kids, or themselves and their jobs, so that people can talk about like how important they are, right? Like, so in my first year at Pavilion as a member, I would read people's content, follow their content, and ask for coffees. And many people said yes, and some people didn't respond to me, or some people said I'm too busy. That's okay. This is sales. We're used to rejection. But when you ask people about themselves and have a genuine interest, like you got to be genuinely curious to understand what makes people tick and about their life. And at this lunch, this lady ended up like, she was like, oh, tell me about you, LG. What are you? And it ended up resulting in a sale, right? So again, having this mindset of give to get, like, what can I contribute to others? This is super important to leverage community successfully and to be known as like a networker, a connector. Because again, you want, especially in today's environment, you want to be able to put yourself in a position to where you know that you've made it in community. When, if you lost your job tomorrow, you would have, I'm gonna talk about your top 10, which is a 10 people who you could call, like, yo, I lost my job. Who do you know? Right? And you wouldn't have to dust off your resume. That's how you know, right? And in order to do that, to ask for that, right? You've had to help other people. So, right, here's ways that if you're like, oh, okay, well, that sounds great. That makes sense. Like, how do I give back, right? You can share an email template or a framework, a playbook, or other asset, introducing someone to another person. You can ask, if you're talking to somebody that's more senior than you, you can ask, hey, how can I help you? Like, are you hiring? Maybe I know some people I can connect you with. I love this story. I don't know for those of you who know Ravi, but Ravi's awesome. He teaches storytelling. He teaches a few storytelling courses through Pavilion University, but I got off a networking call with him, and there was like no other, his goal was we were just catching up, right? Like, he already was an instructor for Pavilion University. So I know that his intentions were just genuinely like, he's like, LG, like, how can I help you? And I was like, well, these are some things I'm working on. As soon as we got off the call, he made this introduction to Jen Allen, who's another sales leader who I've like seen. And, he's like, oh, you know what? I think that you should meet Jen. You guys just have like a similar energy, similar vibe. And maybe you guys will do business together. Maybe not. And immediately after the call, he sent this email intro, which I just thought was a great, again, representation of like what it looks like to be an active participant in community and have that mindset of just genuinely trying to help others. I'd love to pause now and open it up to the group for folks to share, like, maybe what are some examples or stories of you, being an active participant in community in ways that you've either helped others or made intros, or any examples that you have to kind of share on the law of reciprocity.
Kelsey, I'm gonna pick on you.
Pick on me? When was the last time that I felt the law of reciprocity through community? Was that the question?
Yeah, like, do you have a story or an example of when, you've either helped someone, right? Or you've like given back, and you have then in turn felt that help you in your career?
I mean, I feel it a lot, like with Thursday night sales. That's definitely my best example of community, and always getting back what I give, like meeting with people, making genuine connections outside of like asking for anything. And there was, I think it was late 2022, I had lost my job and reached out to Scott immediately and like a couple other people and had like, you know, handfuls of calls, interviews, everything. So I definitely feel that deeply. Just having people that are like immediately able to jump in and vouch for you.
Love that. Love, and
Jason.
is that,
Oh, sorry.
Why? Oh, sorry.
oh no, I was just curious, like, did you find yourself like, by simply like showing up to Thursday night sales and like asking questions and like, or did you make a point to like build those side relationships, or how did that actually turn into you reaching out to Scott?
I'm a little bit more shy, like publicly, I think. So like on Zooms, like I'm not the one to be like on Thursday night sales, I'm very rarely like asking questions. When that situation was happening, I had a career coach at the time. So she was kind of like, you should go on and ask a question. So that was how I made like my first kind of transition into like meeting people. And then it was just a lot of like side relationships. And I think from starting to write content online and starting to just really like network that way, that helped too. But I'm definitely more of like a side connection, inside joke, meet, you know, get to know people and then build that way, as opposed to like being super loud with my voice. So that's usually my kind of how I go about it.
Love that.
Either Jason or Jill, I think both of you were going to chime in with something.
Sure, yeah, I can go. I mean, so I'm more of an in real life kind of person. I've been doing this, I was in IC for over 20 years. Don't know a lot of people that have done that. So if there's anybody that wants any help, I think the first thing I'd like to do is use this to offer any help. And so I think a lot of this stuff is pretty well known, right? Like I think we all know if we're in sales that the idea of leveraging others and being helpful is important. But I was doing the Untethered playbook today and I started thinking about you know, reaching out outside of my comfort zone, because most of my contacts in LinkedIn and most of the people that I know in the sales community are from, you know, real life, thousands of meetings, all that stuff. So I started using an example where I don't know if you guys, I love Lavender, by the way, and I keep trying to figure out some way that I can work with them or help them or do whatever it might be. And I've been reaching out, right? And the idea is that maybe I changed the way that I thought about it and reached out more specifically with just open help, right? So that's what I did today. I started looking at people that maybe I wasn't connected in real life with as much and started reaching out through LinkedIn and doing a few other things. So yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that that's, you know, one way to kind of take me outside of my comfort zone. So
Can I give you an example of how I would try to reach out to Lavender right now and be helpful, Jason?
Absolutely. I would love that. Thank you.
So if you know the story of Lavender, they have been bootstrapped. They haven't raised any money. They've grown really slowly and what's the right word? I don't want to say cautiously.
Intentionally.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Thank you for the assist right there. Okay. So they don't have a lot of people building pipeline. So one thing that you could do that would be massively impactful is just reach out to the folks at Lavender and say, hey, Will, FYI, I talked to these 10 to 20 companies who all told me that they would love an intro to you over there at Lavender. Here's their names, here's their LinkedIn profile, and just be like, love what you guys are up to. If I can ever be helpful to you, let me know. And say, fuck all else. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm just literally dumping leads on them that I've already teed up. You want to make an impact on somebody?
It's so funny. That's what I led with.
You got their attention.
Yeah. So that's what I led with. I led with the idea of getting them leads and bringing them leads. So I love that your thought, but I didn't take it to that next level of actually having people that I talk to in names. So
that's the
I really like that.
Because you got to make there's something to be said, and I'll let LG talk about this rather than me drone on. It's not my show, but you have to make it easy for people when you're trying to help them. So if you come to me and you're like, hey, Scott, you know, what can I do to help you? I'm like, fuck if I know, man. You know what I mean? If you just take the thought, do all the thinking for me, take the step to do the action for me, I'll be like blown away by what you've done. Right? So for example, in the Untethered Blueprint, if you go through the first chapter, we talk about how Ryan Walker and I like built this course. Ryan reaches out to me out of the blue and says, I just spent like 6 weeks figuring out how to build a course. This is what I want to do. Do you want to partner on it? I've done all the back end stuff. I've already paid for all the tools. I've done this, that, and the other. What am I going to do? Say no at that point? Right? So just make it easy on people. So the offer of building pipeline is different than just saying, yo, here's 20 accounts. Here's the list of names, profiles, da, 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 da. Have at it. If I could ever be helpful to you, I'd love to get involved. It's a big difference. So anyway, go ahead, LG.
No, I love that. And I think that's so in line with this like idea of like give to get, because like when we think about all the like shitty emails, like 98% of emails are shitty. Like this is my not fact checker personal opinion. And it's all about like me and my company and my product and my, so I think just reaching out in that way, like you're just going to set yourself apart by simply doing that. And in fact, story about how I got connected to Pavilion in the first place, I started listening to the Sales Hacker podcast, probably right when it started, 4 years ago or so. And I would reach out to all of the speakers, the guest speakers after every one with a personal note on LinkedIn. Hey, loved your podcast. Here's what I learned. If you ever want to chat or like grab a coffee, let me know. And like most, didn't hear back from most people, which is okay, right? But I reached out to Max Alschuler, right? He was the VP of Marketing at Outreach. That was right when the sales engagement book came out. And he said, he responded back to me and said, thanks so much. We're actually doing a sales leader dinner in LA next week. If you'd like to join. That's where I met Sam, and the rest is history, right? So I think like, again, I didn't offer to help in that exchange, but I took the approach of like, if you, I really, again, I liked your content, what you had to say. And if you ever want to like share best practices or like grab a coffee, let me know. Again, because most outreach in that way to like build your own community is all about, it's either impersonal or there's like some, there's a really aggressive call to action. So yeah, I love this whole topic. Okay, so let's talk about building your top 10. I think this is really where you can use community in your deal flow. So whether you're building a community, joining one, and trying to optimize, right? It's super important. And I'm actually very curious to hear Scott's perspective on this, but I call this like building your top 10, right? Which is kind of what I alluded to earlier around like, if you lost your job tomorrow, like, do you have 10 people you can call? You also might have heard some folks refer to this as like your personal board of directors. My advice is like, you need 5 people who are senior to you, right? So like I've got 5 like C-suite executives who, whenever, Sam pisses me off, I'm just kidding, that never happens. I can call for like what I call a micro mentoring session. Like, hey, like, there's this one thing that happened, like, hey, keep me honest here. Like, am I overanalyzing this, overthinking this? Like, let's just talk through this. How should I respond? Right. So 5 people that are senior to you, and then 5 people, either peers or junior to you that you can help and groom and develop. So, before we like move on in talking about like how to actually leverage these folks, like would love to hear from the group, how have you built your, I guess, do we have 10 people? Where do you all sit with like your personal board of directors, this group? And maybe if anyone wants to share like how you developed your own. And by the way, I think like there are some people who I think will stay with you throughout your entire career. But I've personally found that some folks, it's like it's like a basketball team. It's like a bench. Like some people come and go throughout your career, but would love to hear from the group.
Yeah,
I
so
ha-
LG, I think it's important sorry, Scott, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, it wasn't me. Keep going.
Oh, okay. I think it's really important to stay in touch with those folks, so you're not just calling on them when you need something. It's more just reach out and connect. It's much more authentic. I find that throughout my career, I've built relationships with people that I can call on when I need something, but I rarely do. I mean, of all the connections we have, sometimes it's just to reach out at how are you, say hello. I mean, perfect example, my boss from 20 years ago just invited me to his 60th birthday party. And I haven't seen him in, 6 or 7 years, but we connect every, 4 to 6 months and check in, and he, says, I would always hire you as my head of sales and all of those things, because that relationship has been built. I've just sent him, it's kind of the stuff that you were saying before. And Scott's example from Ryan, I just send him people that I think might be able to help him in whatever new business he's in, or an article I think he might like, or a meme, something we shared. And it just keeps those connections real, I would say. Yeah.
Love that.
Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, just really
Yeah.
quickly. Oh, sorry. There was somebody else who interrupted Jill, so I'm gonna
No,
let
no,
whoever-
you're good. Go for it.
You sure? All right, I'll be fast. I actually really like the opportunity. So I'm a sales development leader. So things like SDRleader.com or Pavilion, where Pavilion has a sales development leadership channel. And I found myself being active there. And what I really appreciate, you've probably heard this on LinkedIn or elsewhere online, is building in public. And the beautiful thing about that is oftentimes in my role, I'm not an IC, so there's not a lot of peers at my company that are dealing with some of the stuff that I'm dealing with, but there are a lot of other people that are dealing with the same thing, right? Or similar shades of. And so when I call something out in a community like Pavilion or like SDRleader.com or Modern Sales, insert group here, the beautiful thing is it tends to attract the people that are also thinking about those things. And then it's really quickly, as LG said, to spin up a group. Maybe it's a one season run at the title or something for your basketball team, but you spin up a quick group and like, this is the thing that we need to tackle, and can come back with a sounding board, but like multiple educated decisions and conversations that way. So I find myself, I've got a couple of people that I've been fortunate that I think are senior to me. And I'm a sales development leader, so I feel like I have a lot of peers and or junior people, because that's just the nature of the job that I'm in, but really enjoy having, and I think it's important to have the compendium, have peers, have people that are in different types of sales, have people that are individual contributors, so that you can add value to them, help them, and I think that's really special. So like that to me, with respect to everything else that the Pavilion does, and I promise like this wasn't teed up by LG, but like with respect to the courses, and I'm excited for Scott's as well. But what I love about community, and I was excited because I thought this was actually going to be about community sales, and it is. But I think for me, like the value of community, especially as a leader, when it gets kind of more isolated and you're the only one in your job, is incredibly important. And that's where I have found that like sharing templates with people has done me more good than anything else. So life is open note. The more you can share your notes with other people, the better it tends to go. Sorry to interrupt, Alessio.
No worries. Yeah, I actually did this without even realizing it. And I kind of broke it up into different categories. So I still stay in touch with my former VP of sales, former director of sales. And there's an IC that I worked alongside with really briefly. And I have a quarterly cadence with all 4 of them. So I meet with them once a quarter. And every single time I show up or have a call with them, I always have a purpose, agenda, outcome. So when we walk into the call, we already know what we're going to discuss, and they already are coming prepared. I think the first thing, or one of the things that I've noticed is like really valuable to these people, is being respectful of their time. Just because at least the 4 individuals that I work with, they're extremely busy, and they're not cool with me just saying, hey, I just wanted to check in. Like I have to come with them with a specific problem. a specific purpose and a specific outcome I'm trying to achieve, so they can actually keep their advice tailored for my particular issue. But the one thing I did not think about is people junior to me. And so that's definitely something I want to start doing, because yeah, that's definitely a great way to cultivate the community around you. And if you have to hire other reps, the best way to do it is by knowing a killer rep. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Alessio, mentoring someone is a really good way to build community. I've done that in a formal way and an informal way, and it really does cement relationships in an incredible way.
Yeah, mentoring is probably one of the best ways to kind of start building out some of this stuff. Even if you're like, I helped build out the mentor program in Rev Genius, and one of the processes in there was if you got mentored in one cohort, you had to mentor in the next cohort. So like, even though if you were a mentee in one, you mentored in the next one so that you can give back.
Yeah, I actually, so I was in a fraternity in college, and one of the things that I do is any one of the fraternity guys that wants a sales gig, I always grab coffee with them and always offer to help them out in any way I can. And so every quarter or every semester, I get a fresh new set of guys to talk to about sales and stuff like that. So.
And you never know when that person under you is going to be over you one day. So, you know, the universe keeps giving in a variety of ways.
And it's super fulfilling. Like you watch, you know, I've mentored BDRs and people that have gone from sales that wanted to jump out of sales that are now in project managers. And like, so it's fun to kind of watch them expand and grow wherever they want to go.
I think another point on this mentoring, I'll just share a quick story. There's a guy who I reached out to on LinkedIn because I liked his background. He worked for John McMahon, and we sparked a conversation, and I asked him, hey, can we meet on a monthly basis? I'm happy to pay you as like my executive coach. His name's Tim O'Neill. He's the CRO at Elation. They just raised their Series E, valued at 1.8 billion. And he's like, yeah, I'm happy to help, you know, we can chat. And, so after a few months of chatting and learning from him, we actually just signed him on our advisory board. Right. So he just did this out of the kindness of his heart, because he's like, sure, we sparked up a nice conversation. He like wouldn't take my money, even though I have this budget to pay an executive coach. And now, right, like he's a shareholder. And so I think it's like, again, right, this concept of give to get, like meeting new people, being open, right. And eventually, like with whatever, let's say Alessio, right, like you're meeting with your VPs, you're meeting with folks that are senior to you. I don't know what like stakeholder group you sell into, but like the easiest way to add value in your deal cycles is introducing people, right? Because on discovery calls, like we're asking people, hopefully we're not asking them directly what keeps you up at night, but in a roundabout way, we are trying to understand what problems folks are experiencing. And again, what buyers are used to is like, let me talk to you about my product. Here's the demo. Here's how what they're not hearing is, you know what, Alessio, I actually know someone who is an expert in what you just mentioned. Why, after this call, I'm going to send you all the resources and the follow-up that we talked about. But I actually think if you're interested, I'd be happy to make an introduction to this VP, because, you know, he has a background in building out enterprise or whatever it is, right? Like talk about a way to, you know, stand out, and again, leverage community, which is about people and your network of advisors, or, you know, your tribe. And that's really, I would say, the number one way that I've found to leverage community in deals. Again, but the reason why we're talking about all this first is because you have to be, you know, you have to join these communities and be an active participant and have the right frame of mind, because in order to earn the right to do that, right, you have to have these genuine and authentic relationships. But that's one of the best ways. And I still do that today, right? Which is like, whenever I'm on calls with my reps, like we're understanding what revenue leaders are facing. And I'm saying, hey, you know what, let me introduce you to this person. Just if anything, which is exactly what Ravi did, right? With that conversation with Jen. Okay, cool. So we talked about ways to build your top 10. I think some of this is obvious, right? This isn't like rocket science, but just to kind of reinforce some of these things that we're talking about, right? Attending events, adding these folks on LinkedIn, right? Like all the people in this room here today, right? If somebody said something that you find interesting, like send them a note afterwards on LinkedIn and be like, hey, loved your comment about XYZ. If you ever want to talk about that in more detail, let me know, right? Listening to podcasts, subscribing to blogs, reaching out to the speakers, the thought leaders, right? Like again, in a really thoughtful way, and offering to help, right? Another great idea. So this is how you can start to build your tribe of
Hello, Tequila.
I'll fix that. Somebody's off mute somewhere.
Oh, no worries. Cool. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh, yes, community.people. We talked about making those intros. Again, you can find content everywhere, right? Like content. I think people and relationships are the most valuable asset, but like you can also find, again, resources, content that you can send to your prospects in a deal flow. For example, like we run a monthly pulse survey emailing our executive members about layoffs, budget freezes, hiring freezes, pipeline impact of the recession, right? So just again, example of like a benchmark survey that you can send as like a value add nurture touch. But again, the real way to stand out is by making an introduction to someone else. And in order to do that, you've got to be fully bought into your whatever communities you're in and building those relationships. But
Yeah,
as
Laura, can I add one more thing?
Please.
Or sorry, LG,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not in trouble. I think that groups like this are the most impactful way to build a community faster and more authentically, because this is a small group of people. Everyone's voice is heard or can be heard either through chat or, through coming off mute. And I found that to be true with Clubhouse. I mean, I know it's no more, but I had a Clubhouse room, driving customer loyalty, a club that really, it cemented relationships with people I already knew from the industry. It created new ones. It got me deals, leads, all kinds of things. And that's what these smaller communities can do. I mean, it's great to see content and take courses. I do that as well. But the ability to have this dialogue and have something to go to someone with so that they might remember you or something you shared, I think is pretty powerful. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even, I would encourage each of you to take a leadership role, right? So like maybe, you have something, Jill, right? Or anyone on this line that you want to like present on here or elsewhere, right? And I think I'm forgetting who talked about that in the SDR leadership, but like starting these like micro meetups, right? So like we do a lot of this happens organically in Pavilion and just, online. But I like posted like, hey, we're thinking of moving to a consumption-based pricing model. Are there any experts out there? And like, we got like a call set up for like 4 people to just talk about this. And like somebody in the community who has implemented consumption-based pricing is going to lead this discussion for us, right? So now if I'm talking to a prospect and they're using consumption-based pricing or interested, I'm going to like automatically make an introduction to this guy who's trying to build a brand for himself. And now I'm adding value, to the prospect, right? So like, absolutely. I think these environments are great. And even to take that a step up a notch, right? Like try to like take a leadership role in these communities to start discussions on various topics as well. That's all I got.
LG, I have a quick question. So I'm just like, so I used to be very involved in communities. Obviously, I join this one every week and with Thursday night sales and everything. But I feel like lately I've been in a really weird season of just feeling unmotivated, started like a new role and everything. So I feel like I've been less dedicated and less kind of like consistent with community building. So what tips would you give people that are feeling that burnout of like, whether you're super busy in your 9 to 5 and creating content. I have like a side business. So I just feel like I'm in this place where burnout is very existent. So what like actionable tips would you give somebody in that situation or when they come out of it?
That's a great question. I think that, one of the best ways to like, there's lots of research on this too, like to increase like your happiness, reduce burnout is ironically helping others. And so I think that like, there's probably a way where you can participate in community without as much consistent dedication, right? So maybe you say, you know what, I'm gonna maybe not go to, a certain session for like 2 or 3 weeks, but instead I'm gonna do something that's just as meaningful and impactful, and like do one of those email outreach, like seeing how you can help, or setting up a one-on-one, right? Where you can do it at a time that's convenient for you. Maybe this time isn't as convenient as another time of the day, right? So because I've found that like it is very, very difficult, like the recurring meetups are impactful, but I think the ultimate goal is to use these types of environments to help you build your top 10. And I don't meet with those people every week or every other week. It's right. Like, I think to Jill's point, I make a point to maintain a relationship. I send them, cheeky memes, or, I respond to all their LinkedIn posts and engage. And, quarterly, we have our meetups. But I would say maybe like slow down on like, if you're a part of multiple groups where there's recurring meetings, like it's a lot of meetings, and instead try to focus on, where can you help another individual? Like, where can you have a meaningful one-on-one?
Yeah.
And I think that will like kind of revitalize and give you like the energy, because it's, we're all human. And I think if you've been coming to multiple meetups on a consistent basis for a long time, like it's okay to take a break,
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I think I've been better about taking like for Thursday night sales. I definitely stopped going for a while because I think you start to feel that like you're so tuned into so many different communities. So I went heavily on the self-care side, and now I'm like, okay, got to reintegrate some of these things slowly. So love that advice.
Yeah. Like the executives in our community, they use Pavilion very differently than like our SDRs. Like our SDRs are like, they'll go to all the schools and the courses and then all the meetups and all the things. And like executives will go to like one dinner a quarter, right? And for them, like they're getting value because it's a very meaningful interaction. It's less frequent, right? So I think it's just about like finding the right rhythm for you, or maybe switching it up.
And Kelsey, I would just ask, because you mentioned that you like just recently came out of a self-care kind of phase, and so the things that make you feel your best and bring you back to your truest sense of self. And if you find yourself kind of on the fringes, or like burnout is creeping up, just mix some of those things in, like take a break from a meetup for a day. And for me, going for a walk is super fulfilling and energizing. So I'll mix it up with something like that. But yourself best. It sounds like you've gone into that introspective self-care work and draw upon that, and don't be afraid to, reintegrate on a daily basis some of those things that make you feel your best, bring you back to your truest sense of self. We can do both. We can do both, and it's all about balance.
100%.
Kelsey, I'm trying to find it. There's Kevin Dorsey had a thing. It might have been in his Patreon group, so I'll look at it. I'll send it to you, but he has this thing he called GERMS, which obviously with COVID is not a great acronym, but gratitude, exercise, reading, meditation, and sleep. I'd add eating in there as well. So I call it Germes, like Hermes, but more. I'll see if I can find it and I'll send it to you. If so, but I think you're being self-aware already and understanding that you have burnout. For me, it's like resorting to analog catharsis. Like, I like old cars. I have one. I'm grateful to have one. I like old cameras. I go out and stuff and like do stuff that fills up my cup. And I know I have like a couple of go-to things. And like, I was obviously like having a one-off chat with Jill, but like love being a dad, girl dad to a toddler. That's a lot of stuff. Remodeling our house, like this house, literally like I'm in a room by myself and there's like no house around it. there's a lot of things that take away your energy, but I think just recognizing that is the first step, and then just making sure that you have either the people that you go to and like, hey, like what do you run into when you're running low on mojo, or having a couple of go-to activities is like super helpful. I'll see if I can find that Katie thing.
Yeah, totally. Let me know.
Yeah. But I also feel that like spiritually, for sure. I think we're all feeling that with the election today. Maybe not.
Potentially election energy.
It's the eclipse in Taurus.
Any other questions for LG? Cynthia, it looked like you have one.
Yeah, you know, LG, I really love this conversation because I think probably most of us, especially you know, post-pandemic, we're all part of like at least a dozen communities, online communities. I know I am. And a lot of times I'll reach out, or you know, I'll reach out to certain people to connect, or they'll reach out to me, especially like women earlier in their careers, because it's like in my banner, like I'm a women in tech advocate. So it's a lot of people be like, hey, I saw your background, I'm looking at it, I'm learning how to get into SaaS, yada yada yada. So I do a lot of virtual coffees. And it's so funny because I know what Kelsey's talking about, and what you're saying, Kelsey, really resonates. Because at one point I was doing 3 to 4, like, and they were always at 5 or 5:30, because that's like I'm like officially off work, whatever. And it started to become really draining, and so I pulled back a little bit. But then you know a couple always sneak on because I really can't say no. But what I found, I had one yesterday that I was like, ah, why did I say yes? But it is really it invigorates me, the conversation, when it's the right person. And this was a gal who was, and actually she was using your strategies, Laura. I think, you know, maybe she's part of Pavilion. I don't know. She was younger, but she's kind of with a startup, and she had this interesting solution, and she basically wanted to get my insights from my perspective, blah, blah, blah. But it was sort of a super soft sell, but it was like a non-sell. But she came equipped with this article that was relevant to kind of NPS surveys, which are very controversial in customer success, blah, 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 blah. Great conversation. And in the end, I said, listen, I'm not the right person for you, but I think, you know, you're very impressive. If there's anyone in my network, I'm happy to introduce you to, and I'll definitely keep you in mind, because you just don't know who you're going to run into next. And she definitely had that kind of long-term strategy. So sometimes those conversations can actually, you know, as exhausted as we all get, and as drained as we can be, they can be invigorating. And so, you know, not always, but a lot of times.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, you know, my first year as a member of Pavilion, like I was reaching out to everyone, like anyone who would talk to me, like just, and I think sometimes, like if you're kind of like, I guess, getting started on your community building journey, so to speak, like that's just kind of like what's required, and you can find the right, like, again, cadence and frequency that's best for you. And it'll ebb and flow, but like then eventually, like, again, yeah, you'll have a number of conversations, and you're not going to jive with everybody, and that's okay, right? And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, like this one, like this is a person that, like, even though they might be junior to me or my peer, that I want to connect with. And again, you might be reaching out to folks that are senior to you. And again, I encourage everyone to do that. Like the same approach that we take, or that we teach our teams with prospecting, like, again, you do it in a way that is offering to help. You do it in a thoughtful way that's about someone's content or their leadership or whatever they stand for. But that can be invigorating as well when you have those conversations. And then eventually over time, slowly, like, you know, you're meeting people more on your own time, I guess you can say, right? Like, because you've now started to like build your tribe, your top 10. And then it just starts to happen a bit more organically as you come to these types of events.
Yeah. And I would add too, that that's like so key, what you just said, LG. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And whatever you do, what do you call it? Pitch slap them. So like the minute you connect with someone and you say something authentic about something you read that really resonated with you, and you offer to help, then don't send them like a canned, you know, this is what I do and this is what my company sells, and are you interested in buying, or do you know someone who would buy? Because then that takes away all the goodwill that you might have gained.
Yep.
Do you agree with that, LG?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, again, it has to be thoughtful, and personal. But again, I think like as you're in these various communities, right, like you can be intentional about who you want to, right? It's like a target list for our sales team, like who you want to build relationships with, right? And again, sometimes you have to be open-minded to opportunities. Again, it's give to get. So there will be people reaching out to you and you should take those calls and help others. But at the same time, right, you can be reaching out to other people who you want to build relationships with. And I think if it's done personally and thoughtfully, like absolutely.
Yeah, Jill, actually you bring up a really good point because now too, with all of these layoffs that have been happening lately, there's so many people that reach out and connect, and then they're like, I can't tell you how many DMs I've gotten. They were sort of like they were like pitch slaps, but they were like for jobs. And then I look at like just today before I got on this call, this guy connected with me, seemed like a nice guy. I'm like, that's fine. And he's like, oh, I really love your company, blah, blah, blah. And I look at his background. He worked at DHL. I'm like, have you ever worked at finance or a fintech? Because I sat on a trading desk for 10 years and I still get confused at my company. It's an exchange. It's really involved. You go down a rabbit hole. So he did like zero discovery, didn't bother to have a conversation or try to schedule virtual coffee with me at all. And he's like, and he said something like about like maybe you get a referral. He's trying to get me to refer him. I'm like, dude, I don't know you from Adam. So I think LG, maybe that's a topic Pavilion should cover for like some of the junior members. If you're looking,
Yeah.
don't pitch slap people. Do it as you would as any good SDR would do. Do your
Yep.
discovery, get on the call, make it relevant, make yourself likable. I want to help people. I'll refer anybody who's, would be that I wouldn't be setting up to fail, right? Like if I gave that guy a referral, and he got the job, he'd be set up to fail. It'd be terrible.
Any last questions for LG before we try to wrap it up?
That was a very compelling conversation. Thank you. It helped distill a few things.
LG, I have one quick question for you. I'm curious, outside of Gong or Lavender, if there are other companies that you feel like do community really well. I think a lot about, obviously communities are individuals and members of individuals, but I'm curious if you see other companies, especially small ones, that are doing a good job with their brand that you feel, or their community, that are really strong in your orbit.
Yeah, I think that like the outreach sales hacker, I guess it would be more sales hacker than outreach. They do a good job. HubSpot does a really good job. But yeah, there's not, I think this is like the community-led growth, right? Like this is kind of what all the rage is right now. And so, but yeah, I would say like Gong, HubSpot, and the approach there, I think with most companies is like content first, people second. I think the key is really like is people first. So I think that's probably what I would advise to those of you looking to build a community around Sendoso, your product. Again, find right, whether it's like, and you can create incentives around it, right? Whether it's the same way that we did with our chapter heads. They can be monetary or non-monetary, a free year using your product or whatever it is. But I think that, yeah, there's not too many that I can think of. I know like Salesforce, they have their community, but like they're currently trying to build a CRO community right now. So it's,
yeah, it's super interesting because they're all the ones you just mentioned and all the ones that I can think of are all salespeople selling to salespeople. Like those are the people in our orbit because that's our community, that's our network, but they're all eating their own dog food, which is why like, Rudy Grab, Sendoso, who's a good friend, like that makes sense. Like you build a community, they're your peers, they're also the people you're selling to. I think it's it's really interesting to me to like look at communities and then see how do people then leverage. We've moved from the tell me economy when I was an SDR 15 years ago to the show me economy where we have all these demos and complicated equipment and now you have online reviews and things, and now it's the give me economy, and people are only going to either buy from referrals or buy from community, and or you need both, and you need to be able to give them like a PLG experience in my opinion. So it'll be really interesting to see how that unpacks, but especially for non-sales communities, I was curious if like anybody's doing anything, and I haven't seen anything so far.
Yeah, I know it's funny. I like asked my friend who's product leader. I'm like, do you follow like product influencers on LinkedIn? He's like, no, I'm pretty like, I'm always telling him, he's like, I'm pretty sure that's just salespeople. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think the key with that is like, again, to Scott's point earlier, people now more than ever, there's I think I saw a statistic on this. I think it was like less than 8% of Gen Z like trusts politicians or people in power, right? So people are turning to practitioners on LinkedIn or elsewhere to get their information. And so I think to build a community now, it's about finding thought leaders, subject matter experts. They don't need to be like, LinkedIn famous or whatever. They just need to be truly knowledgeable and an expert in their craft. And I think finding different topics, right? Because that's, again, what we did at Pavilion, which is like the umbrella is revenue. And we have people leading our SDR channel. We have people leading our enterprise channel. We have people leading our CMO channel. We have RevOps people leading so whatever your space is, it's finding those advocates, and empowering them, enabling them, incentivizing them, to be a thought leader in your space. And then people will follow people, right? People are more loyal to personal brands than company brands. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how the space shakes out.
Cool.
Did that
Well,
answer y'all's question? I'm looking at
thanks.
chat here.
nodding heads.
Cool. By the way, if anyone feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, and if anyone wants to do like a virtual coffee one-on-one, happy to chat and hang out more one-on-one.
Appreciate that offer. I'm sure some people will take you up on it. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. Have a good time in New York. Get back home to California safely. We'll see y'all next time. We're
Thanks,
gone.
y'all.
Thanks,
LG.
LG.
Thanks, Scott.
Good to see
Bye,
you
guys.
all.
Thanks,
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Scott.